And now it's time for video number 2, my friends. Jim Rogers, we're about to have the worst economic problems of a lifetime. A lot of people will disappear. So we're going to have to get into that one. And then Barclays, significant change coming to the Fed over the next 18 months. Let's start with that one because apparently there's a lot of, or a few anyways, board, governor, whatever positions of the Federal Reserve, not the head governor position, which is Janet Yellen. She's only around for another year. But there's other ones that some of the local or regional branches or whatever of the Fed. There's I think 12 different branches, and they're saying either Trump can leave it that way or he's going to put his own people, his own picks. Following yesterday's surprise resignation announcement by Obama friend and Fed regulatory point man Daniel Tarullo, which in turn followed last week's resignation announcement by the Fed's general counsel, Scott Alvarez, and which means that there will be 3 open governor seats at the Fed, resulting in more Fed presidents, 5, than governors, 4, under the vacant slots, until the vacant slots are filled. Now, this is very interesting because the Webbot, again, that Webbot, said you're going to look at the Trump administration and people leaving, gone. Remember that? I forget the exact wording it used. I'm not going to go dig through which report it was. Could have been November, December, maybe, one of those reports. And it was saying, early in his administration, there's going to be some uprooting. And boy, have we been seeing it. This is a spot on thing. This one resigned. Remember, we had the State Department, the next highest levels of level position, 3, 4, or 5, maybe was it? You no longer needed. Mainstream media reported it and said, "Oh, the Trump administration, they walked out, they quit." No, Trump fired them through the Secretary of State doing. He gave them the permission to get rid of these guys. He got rid of them. Not they walked out, they quit. They were fired. Okay. We have the remember the Army guy, the guy that was in charge of the Army, whatever his I can't think of his name. Another, rich guy. And we're like, we don't know about that pick. Well, he's decided to decline recently because he said a little bit of conflict of interest with some of the companies and business deals he has. So he's going to step away from that position, which is a good thing. But again, this is the kind of thing the Webbot said to look for. And this is absolutely what's happening here. Trump can now populate the Fed board with governors whose views echo his own, especially if strong pro-Clinton supporter and donor Lael Brainard is the next to go, even if it is still unclear just what that view is. Between Trump's USD positive proposed trade policies and his USD negative currency war statements, it remains to be seen if Trump wants a stronger or weaker U.S. currency. In any case, Barclays Fed watcher Michael Gapin warns that no matter what, significant change is coming to the Federal Reserve Board of Governors over the next 18 months. Although, like most other things in flux these days, what that can change will be is also unclear. What is more clear, however, is that the deepening on the plans of Governor Lael Brainard, we would not be surprised to see 5 or 6 new faces on the board by the middle of 2018. That's one thing. Okay, so this is, to me, again, good news. When I see people that you've never really heard about in key positions, again, these are appointed positions. Like I always say, look at who, you want to know what side these people are that we vote into office, whether you're voting someone to be a governor of your state, a politician like a senator or House member, whatever it is, whether it's state or federal, look at their connections. Follow, connect the dots. And in many of these cases, who are these people when they get to appoint somebody? Who are they appointing? Because you and I don't vote for the appointments. They stay there and they stay there and they stay there until someone needs to reappoint them. So when these rats are jumping ship, when I see rats jumping ship, this is a very positive sign that, again, Donald Trump is doing what he said he's going to do, and that even though he's had a few weird choice picks, Goldman Sachs here, Goldman Sachs there, overall, it's looking pretty good. Okay? So Jim Rogers, we're about to have the worst economic problems of a lifetime. And a lot of people will disappear, he says. Quote, get prepared, warns billionaire commodity guru Jim Rogers. Because we're going to have the worst economic problems in your lifetime, and a lot of people are going to disappear. In this, and I'm going to link this particular article in my description box below of this video, because he has basically a little podcast or something that this was recorded on in full. This article only covers the highlights. So if that's all you care about, then I'm about to give it to you. If you want to hear the whole thing, well, follow the link and you will see it over here to Zero Hedge. In this wide-ranging interview with Macro Voices' Eric Townsend, the investing legend discusses everything from whether Russia is being scapegoated, yes, asked Victoria Nuland, the war against cash, governments love it, they want to control everything, to his views on gold and the demise of freedom. Key excerpts. Are Russians the bad guys? Well, I do know that during the last administration, Mr. Obama's administration, as you probably remember, we tried to pull off an illegal coup in Ukraine, and we got caught at it. What's her name? Victoria Nuland, whatever the woman's name. The State Department. There are several pieces of evidence where we knew she tried to instigate an illegal coup. Then, of course, the Russians outsmarted us, and so the State Department started blaming it on the Russians, and the hype against the Russians has gotten bigger and bigger ever since we started, or tried to instigate the illegal coup, Crimea and Ukraine. So yes, we are certainly at fault to some extent, and obviously you then, when you're caught, you've got to keep the rhetoric up and keep throwing more and more accusations, and so the State Department has done that. I know that before the illegal coup, Obama, Bush, everybody was trying to be friends with the Russians, rightly so. Cold War had ended long ago. The Russians wanted to be friends with America. We didn't need NATO anymore. Who needed the Cold War, etc.? All the money we were spending on some of these arms manufacturers and soldiers, so until the illegal coup took place, we were all trying to be great friends. You remember George Bush said, I looked at him in the eye, and he's a man I can admire and work with, etc. So now, of course, and he's speaking of Vladimir Putin. So now, of course, the Democrats, especially since they lost the election and are trying to blame it on the Russians, it's unfathomable to me how the Russians could have determined the outcome of the elections. Maybe they planted a story or two, but so what? It's inconceivable to me that the Russians could influence, much less determine, the election. I think if we start having investigations of the illegal voting, I'm afraid we're going to find more for the Democrats than for the Republicans, places, big cities. In America, won't name names, but so far, the few investigations that have taken place, we find that the voting irregularities are in big cities, which are Democratic strongholds. On the Greater Depression, he says, get prepared, because we're going to have the worst economic problems we've had in your lifetime or my lifetime. And when that happens, a lot of people are going to disappear. In 2008, Bear Stearns disappeared. So maybe that's what he was. I thought he was going with the old, suicided, because Webbot has said, again, and it was right the first time because it nailed that. A lot of bankers going missing. It got it right. But a whole lot more. He said, not necessarily a whole lot more, but it's going to be 2.0 again. It's going to be coming soon, where people disappear, death, suicide, etc. And I thought maybe that's what this guy was going to allude to. Maybe he is, but he's talking about companies right now. In 2008, Bear Stearns disappeared. Bear Stearns had been around for over 90 years. Lehman Brothers disappeared. Lehman Brothers had been around for over 150 years. A long, long time, a long, glorious history. They've been through wars, depression, civil war. They've been through everything, and yet they disappear. So the next time around, it's going to be worse than anything we've seen. And a lot of institutions, people, companies, even countries, certainly governments, and maybe even countries, are going to disappear. I hope you get very worried, he says. When you start having bear markets, as you, and I'm sure will well know, one bad thing happens and another bad thing happens, and these things snowball, just like in bull markets. good news comes out, then more than, hold on, just like in bull markets, good news comes out, then more good news comes out. The next thing you know, you're 5 or 6, 7 years into a bull market. Well, bear markets do the same thing. And so we have a lot of bad news on the horizon. I haven't even gotten to war yet. I haven't even gotten to trade war or anything like that. But you know things do go wrong. On Trump and the possibility of trade wars. And by the way, someone sent me an email. I thought I was sending that to myself. It might my other email address. Let me pull that open. Because, you know, Trump just met with the leader of China. And let's see. Yeah. Hey, Jay Snip. This video from Richie from Boston captured a clip of Trump's speech. He talks about his conversation with Xi Jinping, that's the leader, president of China. He said, quote, "We had a very warm conversation. As far as the currency devaluations, I have been complaining about that for a long time. And I believe we will all eventually, and a lot sooner than anyone understands, we will all be at a level playing field, because that's the only way it's fair. That's the only way you can compete in trade. And we will all be on that field, and we will all be working very hard to do great for our countries." So that was his comment. And I thought, well, it could at face value be like, oh yeah, we had a great conversation. We understand the problems we both face. They need to devalue, and essentially we need to devalue. Donald Trump's been saying it. Our dollar's way too high. We need to devalue. But if you're China and you have a massive population, which they do, massive, 1.3 or 4, I think it's 1.4 billion now. You don't want civil unrest. You want to be able to build some more ghost cities. You know, these giant cities they built and no one's in them. You want that kind of stuff. You can't really afford to be fair with every other country on the face of the earth and compete with every other country on the face of the earth when you've had a monopoly of super cheap labor all these years. So my personal opinion on that is they had a good conversation, but it's not going to amount to more than a conversation. Currency wars, trade wars, real wars. Isn't that something Gerald Celente says too? Currency wars, trade wars, real wars. I do believe that's on the horizon. Mr. Trump has also said he's going to have a trade war with China, Mexico, Japan, Korea, a few other people that he has named. He swore that on his first day in office, he would impose 45% tariffs against China. He's been there 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and he hasn't done it yet, but he's still got it in his head, I'm sure. Or maybe he's just another politician like all the rest of them. He says one thing and he doesn't mean it all, but he does have at least 3 people in high levels in his group who are very, very keen to have trade wars with China and other people. If he does that, Eric, it's all over. I mean, history is very clear that trade wars always lead to problems, often to disaster, sometimes even to real war, a shooting war. So I don't know. I'm not sure Mr. Trump knows. He said so many things, and many of the things are contradictory. Now, if he's going or not going to have trade wars with various people, then chances are for a while, happy days are here. So on that statement, we have to think. He just said, Mr. Trump did, I had a great conversation with the Chinese president. We understand the devaluations. We're going to make a level playing field. That's what it needs to be. So maybe if he is able to pull that off, and that also means everybody in this, and it's mainly China, so let's just focus on us and China, that they stand by their word. We're going to settle down. We're not going to keep devaluing and then you go down, we go down. We're going to make it fair so we both can have good competition and that yada, yada, yada. But I do have a question for you all. Okay? And there's more to this article, but I don't even need to go there. The lifestyle of a Chinese person, average Chinese person, versus the lifestyle of an average American person are kind of night and day. Which country uses 25% of the world's output? Raise your hand if you're an American. 25% of the world's output. That's us. So, something Ken Fromm had told Lindsey Williams before he died, which is why I'd like to refer this to you, because it's not anything new he said, and what he said new, I just don't believe. He is in Lindsey Williams, but Ken Fromm, aside from saying watch China, he said there would be currency wars and trade wars, okay? But he also, what was I going to say? Hang on, give me a second. All right, had a little brain freeze there, or brain fart, if you will. The American lifestyle, he said, he told Lindsay this, is going way down. He said, his words were this. When he says you, he means us, you, the people. He said, you are never, when this all goes down, you are never, ever going to have the lifestyle, the things you have now in America, you enjoy now. You're never going to have that level of them again. He says, America will recover. We will get by. We will recover. It's going to happen. But you will never, even after the recovery, you will never have it to the extent, or even close to the extent that they've got it. So, as good as we have it now, it's never going back there. That was his words. Now, you could argue and say, yeah, but Jason, man, Trump's president, that wasn't supposed to happen. A lot of things changed. I'll say, you know what, you're right. So what does that mean? So we have to look at some things. Why would China want to be on a level playing field with us when it has loved being the sweatshop labor country in the world, able to undercut everybody? Go to Alibaba.com. It's nothing but Chinese vendors. It is nothing but massive amounts of Chinese vendors selling anything and everything in the world you can think of. And I'll go a step further, even selling stuff you've never even thought of. Just poke around at Alibaba.com and you will see everything and anything you can imagine. So all of a sudden, can you imagine being the Chinese president? We're going to be fair to America, which would mean what? Their lifestyles would have to come down even more too. So ours are going to come down and theirs are going to come down even more. There's a lot of poor people in China. How are they going to deal with that, right? So there's a lot of questions that I have when I hear this and say, how the hell are they going to deal with that? It sounds good. I appreciate you guys having a conversation back and forth. Trump's been yelling at the Chinese for a while now about their devaluation, their money manipulators, their currency manipulator. And then says very recently, we had a great conversation. We understand it's going to be a level playing field. It's going to happen sooner than anyone thinks. Maybe, again, because that's just Jay Snip4 here sitting in his house behind a green screen back here commenting on this. Maybe, just maybe, they really do have some good plans for all of us. And we don't have to go down the doom and gloom road that every single piece of data, even government data that I'm staring at in the face right now, is saying, Jay Snip, you need to look at this data again. Good times are coming. Jay Snip, do you need to look at this data again? That's what the data is saying to me. And I look over at the data and say, data, do you know that Donald Trump's president? And the data says, I don't care if God was president right now. Jesus, baby Jesus, was president. This data isn't going away. Unfunded liabilities aren't going away. $20 trillion in debt is not going away. Unless they have a plan that none of us have ever heard about or known about behind the scenes, where they're just going to wipe out all this massive debt and start over somehow. And they've agreed, we're going to start over. Currency wars, we don't have to do it. We're just going to start over, kind of reset everything.